I didn't plan to stay that late at the shop. The rain had started just after sunset, thin at first, then hard enough to drown out the radio and rattle the roof. Most people would have gone home hours ago, but she'd asked if I could wait, said her car wouldn't start, and she didn't trust anyone else to look at it. She was my cousin, technically, though the word felt wrong when I said it. Too tidy for what she was. Too small. When she walked in, shaking the rain from her coat, I noticed her before she said a word. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she looked out of place. The kind of woman who didn't belong in a room that smelled like oil and rust. She carried herself like someone used to control, posture straight, movements deliberate, but her eyes told another story. Tired. Maybe lonely. Or maybe I was just seeing what I wanted to see. Didn't think you'd actually wait, she said, smiling faintly. You always this patient? Only when it rains, I said, half joking, half hoping she wouldn't notice how my hands were trembling from the cold. She hung her coat on a hook and leaned against the counter, watching as I wiped grease from my palms. There was a silence that didn't feel awkward. Not yet, just thick. The kind that makes you aware of small sounds. The ticking clock, the slow drip of rainwater outside, the faint hum of the lights. I bent over the open hood, pretending to study the engine. She stood beside me, close enough that I could smell the faint scent of her shampoo, something floral and expensive that didn't belong anywhere near a busted Corolla. You've changed, she said after a while. Yeah. You used to talk all the time when you were younger. Couldn't shut you up. Guess I learned silence works better. She laughed, a quiet, low sound that somehow made the space feel smaller. That's not always true. When I looked up, she was watching me, not in that casual family way, but in a way that made me look away first. I wiped my hands again, though they didn't need it. The moment passed like a spark that touched air. Quick, quiet, gone before either of us could name it. The car wasn't much trouble, just a dead battery. I told her I could charge it enough to get her home. She nodded, but didn't move toward the door. Can I wait inside? She asked, gesturing toward the small office with a coffee pot and 2 metal chairs. Sure. When I brought her a mug, black, the way she liked it, she smiled in thanks, brushing my hand by accident as she took it. Or maybe not by accident. I couldn't tell. But the touch stayed longer than it should have. She sat, sipping quietly, her coat draped across her knees. The rain softened outside. I don't know why I still come to you for help, she said finally, almost to herself. I shrugged. Maybe you just trust me. Her eyes flicked up. Maybe I shouldn't. The words landed strange, not teasing, not serious, just somewhere in between. I didn't answer. She didn't push it. We stayed like that for a while, both of us pretending to listen to the rain, both of us not moving. When she finally stood to leave, I followed her out to the car, umbrella half useless in the wind. She turned before getting in, gave a small smile, and for a second, the light from the workshop hit her eyes just right. Soft, uncertain, alive. Thanks, she said quietly. You always show up when I don't expect it. She didn't mean anything by it. Probably. But I thought about that line all night. How don't expect it sounded like a warning, and how you always show up felt like something else entirely. And I didn't sleep at all. She came by again 3 days later. Said it was about the car, though I knew the battery would have lasted another year. The shop was quieter that morning, sunlight spilling through the high windows in pale streaks. I was sorting invoices when I saw her silhouette at the door, hesitating before pushing it open. That pause told me more than her words ever could. Hope I'm not interrupting, she said, sunglasses still on though it wasn't bright enough to need them. I shook my head. Never. She smiled a little, but it didn't reach her eyes. Thought I'd bring you coffee this time. Fair trade. She held out a paper cup, the kind from that cafe near her office, the one with her name scrawled in cursive on the side. I took it carefully, our fingers almost brushing. Almost. Thanks, I said. You didn't have to. I know. She looked around, as if seeing the place for the first time. You've made this space yours. It suits you. Messy and loud. Real, she said. That's rare. I wanted to ask what she meant, but she'd already crouched beside the car, her hair falling over her face as she inspected the same hood we'd opened days ago. I leaned against the workbench, pretending to check something on my phone, just to keep from staring too obviously. There was something in the way she moved, composed but cautious, like she was holding herself together in pieces no one was supposed to see. The lines around her eyes softened when she wasn't thinking. Her hands lingered too long over nothing. And when she laughed, it came in small bursts, as if she wasn't sure she was allowed to. "You're quiet again," she said suddenly. "Just listening." "To what?" I shrugged. "You." She looked up, caught off guard, a flicker of vulnerability before she smoothed it away. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because people might start believing them." Her tone was gentle, but her hands tightened slightly on the edge of the hood. I could see the small tremor in her fingers, the kind people try to hide by moving too quickly. "You okay?" I asked. She exhaled through her nose, gave a small smile that didn't quite fit. "Long week." "I'm fine." She wasn't fine, but I didn't push. Instead, I wiped my palms on a rag and reached past her to close the hood. My arm brushed her shoulder. Barely, but the air between us shifted. The scent of her perfume mixed with engine oil and heat. Neither of us moved right away. Then she said softly, "You should go out more. You're too young to be locked in here all the time." "Maybe I like it here." She turned to me then, eyes searching mine, something conflicted flickering behind them. "You remind me of someone I used to know," she whispered. "Before everything got complicated." I wanted to ask who. I didn't. The way she said complicated told me I didn't need to. We stood there, both pretending to focus on the car, both aware we weren't. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the door, breaking the moment. She reached for her keys. I reached for my coffee. "Thanks for the checkup," she said. "Anytime." She paused, halfway out the door. "You always say that." I met her eyes. "And I always mean it." Her lips parted as if to answer, but she didn't. She just gave a small nod, turned, and walked into the sunlight, leaving the faint scent of her perfume behind. I stood there longer than I should have, the coffee cooling in my hand, wondering why her absence always felt louder than her presence. The rain always seemed to find us. She'd stopped by after work, saying she just needed a quick look at the wipers, though the car was spotless and her tone too casual to be real. The storm outside was swelling fast, wind bending the sign out front, the kind that made the walls hum. I told her she could wait inside until it passed. She hesitated at the door, coat dripping, eyes scanning the small room like she wasn't sure she should be there. But she came in anyway, shaking off the cold. "I didn't mean to bother you this late," she said, rubbing her hands together. "You didn't." The power flickered once, then steadied. The room was small enough that every movement had a sound. Her wet shoes on the floor, my breath when I tried not to look at her too long. She took the chair near the window, watching the rain run down the glass in slow silver lines. I sat across from her, pretending to scroll through invoices on my phone. The storm filled the silence between us, thick and alive. After a while, she spoke. "Do you ever wonder what people think when they see us?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't think they see us," I said. She gave a quiet, thoughtful laugh. Maybe that's the problem. I wanted to ask what she meant, but something in her face told me she wasn't sure either. Her hair had loosened from the rain, small strands clinging to her neck. She looked tired, like she'd been carrying a secret too long. I reached for a towel from the counter and held it out. She took it, brushing my fingers. Not enough to mean anything, but enough to make the air feel heavier. "Thanks," she murmured. She started to say something else, then stopped, looking down at the towel like it might tell her what to do next. Her phone buzzed on the table between us, sharp, breaking the moment. She glanced at the screen, then turned it face down. "Everything okay?" I asked. She nodded, too quickly. "It's just nothing." But it wasn't nothing. The way her jaw tightened, the way she stared at the window, it was someone she didn't want to explain. Maybe the ex she never mentioned by name. Maybe something else entirely. I didn't press. Instead, I said quietly, "You can talk if you want." She met my eyes for a moment too long. "I shouldn't." "Why not?" "Because you listen too closely," she said. She said it like it was a flaw, like she wished I wouldn't. The lights flickered again, and for a second the whole room went dark. In that darkness, I heard her breath, shallow, uncertain, And before I could stop myself, I reached out, my hand finding hers on the table. When the lights came back, she didn't pull away. Not right away. Her fingers were warm, trembling slightly. The thunder rolled outside, low and deep. Then she stood abruptly, pulling her hand back, smoothing her hair like she'd caught herself doing something wrong. I should go before the roads flood. Stay till it eases up, I said. I can't. She grabbed her coat, her voice steady but softer now. Don't look at me like that. I didn't even know what she meant. Maybe I did. But she was already halfway to the door, fumbling for her keys. When she stepped out, the wind caught the door, slamming it shut behind her. I stood there, her warmth still ghosted across my palm, the rain echoing where her voice had been. And I wondered, if the lights hadn't come back on, would she have let me keep holding her hand? She didn't come by for nearly a week after that night. Every evening, I'd catch myself glancing at the clock around the time she usually stopped in, and then force myself to look away. I tried to tell myself it was just routine, that I'd gotten used to her voice breaking the silence of the shop. But when she finally walked in again, unannounced, it felt like the air shifted back into place, and I hated that it did. She looked different this time. Not polished, just tired. Her hair was tied back, her eyes rimmed faintly with sleeplessness. I was driving by, she said, though her car was spotless and the engine fine. Thought I'd check in. I nodded, wiping my hands on a rag. Sure. You want coffee? She shook her head. No. She stopped mid-sentence, like the words had betrayed her halfway through. Never mind. There was something about the way she said it. Too soft, too final. That made me put the rag down. What's wrong? I asked. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You always ask that. Because you never answer. Her eyes met mine, steady, searching. Maybe because I don't know anymore. The rain hadn't come this time, but the room still felt heavy, like it remembered. I waited. She didn't fill the silence. Finally, I said it. Not what I wanted to, but what had been sitting between us for too long. What are we doing? The words came out quieter than I meant, but they landed like a weight between us. She blinked, once, slowly. We're not doing anything. Does it feel like nothing to you? Her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked down, fingers tracing the seam of the countertop. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I'm just trying to understand it. There's nothing to understand. She said it too quickly, and her voice trembled just enough that it undid the meaning. I stepped closer, just a little. Close enough to see the small scar near her wrist, the one she always tried to hide with her watch. You can't keep pretending this is nothing, I said. I see the way you look at me. She laughed once, quiet and sad. You're too young to think everything that hurts has to mean something. Maybe, but this does. Her breath caught. A small, sharp sound she tried to swallow. Don't, she whispered. Don't make this real. It already is. We stood there in silence, close enough that I could feel the warmth coming off her skin, but not close enough to touch. Finally, she said, you don't know what it costs me just to stand here. I wanted to ask why, wanted to ask who made her afraid of wanting something simple. But her eyes were already glassy, fixed on the floor. I keep thinking if I stop coming here, it'll fade, she said quietly. But it never does. She straightened then, as if pulling herself back together. We can't keep doing this. I nodded, even though the word can't felt like a knife. She turned to go. At the door, she stopped, not looking back, just standing there with her hand on the frame. Her voice came out low, almost breaking. You make me forget how old I am. Then she left, leaving the door half open, the sound of her words still echoing in the space she'd just emptied. It had been 2 weeks since she'd said those words. You make me forget how old I am. She hadn't come by since. The shop felt hollow without her voice threading through it, without the scent of her perfume lingering in the corners. I told myself it was for the best, that maybe the distance would quiet whatever was building between us. But that morning, I found a small envelope wedged under the shop door. My name, written in her unmistakable looping script. No return address. No note on the back. Just my name. Inside was a photograph. Old, grainy, edges worn. A man stood beside a car, half smiling at whoever was holding the camera. He looked older than me, but not by much. And behind him, barely visible in the background, was her. Younger, softer, sunlight caught in her hair. There was a folded page tucked behind the photo. The handwriting was careful, restrained. I didn't mean to keep this. I thought I'd thrown it away years ago. But when I saw you standing by that old blue sedan, it hit me. You even hold a wrench like he did. He wasn't family. He wasn't supposed to matter that much either. But he did. And he left before I could tell him that. You remind me of the part of myself I buried with him. No signature. No goodbye. Just that. I sat at the workbench for a long time, the hum of the fluorescent lights loud in my ears. I didn't know what to feel, only that something shifted inside me, like the ground had tilted, and I was just realizing how much weight I'd been standing on. When she finally came later that evening, it was like she knew I'd already read it. She didn't say anything when I held the envelope out, just looked at it, then at me. You weren't supposed to see that, she said softly. You left it for me. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Finally, she nodded, her gaze falling to the floor. I don't even know why. Maybe I needed someone else to carry it for a minute. Was he? I stopped myself, unsure what question I was trying to ask. She understood anyway. He was someone who made me feel young, and stupid, and alive. She laughed once, brittle. And then he died in a car accident 3 weeks after that photo. The silence that followed was unbearable. I could hear the click of the clock, the faint hum of rain starting outside. I shouldn't have come here, she said. You didn't deserve to be tangled in someone else's ghosts. I shook my head. You're not the only one who can't let go of what's gone. She looked up then, really looked. The kind of gaze that strips away excuses. Her eyes softened, the smallest flicker of something unguarded breaking through. You don't even know him, she whispered. Maybe not. But I know the look you had when you talked about him. She swallowed hard, eyes glistening. You're too young to understand. Maybe, I said. But I think I do. For a long moment, she didn't move. The only sound was the rain tapping against the metal roof. Then she stepped closer, her voice barely more than breath. You shouldn't remind me of him, she said. But you do. And that scares me more than losing him ever did. She reached out, not to touch me, but to steady herself against the counter. And in that space between us, something fragile cracked open. Neither of us spoke. We just stood there, the photograph on the table between us, two people bound by a grief that didn't belong to either of us, and yet somehow did. It was late when she came again, later than usual, the kind of hour when the city had folded into itself. I was closing up, the lights half dimmed, the air thick with the smell of rain-soaked pavement and engine oil. She didn't knock this time, just opened the door and stood there like someone who'd run out of excuses. I couldn't sleep, she said quietly. I didn't answer right away. I just nodded toward the chair near the workbench. She sat, pulling her coat tight around her. The silence felt different now, not sharp, not awkward, just tired. Familiar. After a while, she said, You still have that photo? I reached into the drawer and set it on the table between us. The edges had curled slightly. Her eyes traced it, not touching. I keep thinking about him, she said. And then I realize it's not him anymore. Her voice broke on the last word. Not dramatically, just enough to make me look up. I don't want to replace anyone, I said. I know. She breathed out slow. But somehow you didn't. The hum of the lights filled the room again. I could hear the faint tapping of her fingernail against the metal surface, steady and uncertain. I've spent half my life trying not to need anyone, she said. And now, I come here just to hear you say nothing. I didn't move closer, though every part of me wanted to. Instead, I said softly, Then maybe silence is enough. She smiled, small, real, exhausted. You make it sound simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. Her eyes lifted to mine, searching, weighing. Everything's complicated at my age. Maybe, I said, but not this. For the first time, she didn't look away. Her gaze held, unflinching, the air between us thinning until it was barely there. She reached out, her hand hesitating halfway, then resting lightly on mine. It wasn't a bold gesture, not something that belonged in a story. It was quiet, almost accidental, the way people reach for something when words start failing. Her thumb brushed over my knuckles once, slow, deliberate. The room felt smaller, the world quieter. I don't know what this is, she whispered. Neither do I said. But it's real. She nodded, her expression softening, not in surrender, but in recognition, like she'd finally stopped running from herself. We sat like that for a long time, our hands still between us, the photograph catching the dull light. No promises, no explanations. Just breath. Presence. Outside, the storm had thinned to a soft drizzle. The sound of it filled the pauses between heartbeats. Finally, she leaned her forehead against my shoulder. Barely, just enough to rest. The gesture was almost nothing, but in it, everything we hadn't said lived quietly. I didn't speak. Neither did she. There was no need to. Because in that small, fragile silence, we both understood. Whatever we'd been avoiding had already begun, and whatever came next didn't need to be named. It was enough to sit there, together, while the world exhaled around us. It's been months now. The shop still smells the same. Metal, rain, and coffee gone cold. But the air feels lighter somehow, like the walls finally exhaled after holding too much. She doesn't come by as often anymore. Not because anything broke between us, but because it didn't have to. Some connections don't need constant tending. They just are. The last time I saw her, she was laughing, really laughing, at something I said that wasn't even funny. It caught me off guard. How easy it sounded now. How different from the first time she'd walked in with the rain in her hair and that cautious, practiced smile. She told me she'd started traveling again. Said she wanted to see the coast she used to visit with her parents. I forgot I'm allowed to miss things that aren't people, she said. I didn't have an answer for that. I just smiled, and she squeezed my hand before she left. And I think that's when I realized it. That love, or whatever we had, doesn't always demand possession. Sometimes it just wants presence. To be known, even briefly, by someone who sees you without asking you to explain yourself. When I first met her, I thought she was a mystery I needed to solve. All her silences and sidelong glances, her laughter that always came half a beat late. But now, I think she was just someone learning how to feel again. And maybe I was, too. She taught me that closeness doesn't always mean contact. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is sit beside someone without reaching for more. She showed me that love can be quiet, flawed, and still enough to change you. I don't know if what we had fits into the word love. Maybe it's something smaller, or maybe something deeper. But I do know this. When she hugged me goodbye the last time, it wasn't the kind of embrace that asks for more. It was the kind that says thank you for seeing me. And I did. I still do. Now, when the rain hits the roof at night, I think of her, not with ache, but with warmth, with gratitude, because some people don't stay forever. They just pass through at the exact moment you need reminding that you're capable of feeling something real. And that's enough. Maybe that's all love ever has to be. He exhales softly, glancing at the old photograph still tucked behind the workbench, edges curled, the past caught in fading light. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?